In this video, we will review the second mock comp for LPHD 753. This is the question that will be answered in mock comp 2. So we're looking at what is construct validity, face validity, content validity, predictive validity, concurrent validity, convergent validity, and discriminant validity. So all of a sudden, you should see that there is once again a list of items. And this is pretty common with our mock comps, and in fact on the final comprehensive exam, pretty common that there will be a list of items. So to just start your outline for the comprehensive exam or the mock comprehensive exam, you just want to go ahead and plop in those lists of items. Right here we have the items. And then you want to go ahead and remember, we want an introduction and we want a conclusion. So this, if I can spell right, conclusion. This gives you the overall outline of what your mock comp should look like for this period. Now with this, we want to include your content knowledge. So basically the definition of what each of these items are. You also want to include an application, practical knowledge, so that we can see not only do you understand what the definition is, but can you apply it practically? And that's huge with your mock comps. We need to do both. Do you know what it is by definition? Do you know the content? And secondly, can you apply it practically? Okay, so we're going to do this the same way that we did in the previous class with using headings and such. So I went ahead and started that for you down here. Now here we have the introduction. Again, we have a heading. So if I was going to go into find, you can see the headings are right here. I have a few variations here for you. So, but I do have the introduction, each one of the validities, and the conclusion. Now what I want to show you though for this period is that what I often see is a short version of the mock comp. Now remember, you have 2 hours to do this. So when you lay out your outline just like this, you want to do a complete dump of all the information you know about each one of these items. And in doing that, it should include the definition, any extra things that you can think about that would be relevant to the mock comp. Make sure that you only put information in that's accurate. For example, if I put in a name and a date, it should be accurate. If it's not, that can cause you to fail the test. You also want to make sure that if you can't come up with something as a practical application, you can hypothetically come up with something. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an exact example from research, but you can just simply hypothetically come up with an example. We just want to make sure that everything is relevant and accurate. So this is an example here of what I usually see. And I would say this would be borderline pass. We have a fail, low pass, and pass. So this could maybe squeeze by as a low pass. And the reason for that is there's nothing in here at all about practical application. Now, did it answer the question of what is construct validity? Yes, it did. This gives you a definition of construct validity, a definition of face validity. Each one has a definition. But it's not giving you a good feeling that the student knows how to apply this, that there's not any examples whatsoever. So you see this one page here. And one of the questions that I get often is there a minimum page count or a minimum word count? There's not. There's not for the mock comps. There's not for the real comp either. But if you're given 2 hours to do something, it should be a little bit more lengthy than this. So that's my words of wisdom as far as length goes. Now, what I did then is I took this, because this is just basically a brain dump of the definition. That's it. And I went ahead and I added to it. So this is what my final will look like here. I have the introduction, which is a little bit longer. I talk about construct validity. I give the definition. I also give an application. So I talk about different scales, followership scales. Now this is hypothetical. Here I'm saying that the construct validity involves considerable thinking about how the labels read. And so if I develop a new scale for followership, but the subscales relate to leadership, then that's not a good scale. I want all of my scale constructs to relate to one another. I also take it a step further and look at how do we measure this. So if you can go further, perfect. If you can't, that's okay too. But you'll see here, if I want to measure right here to test for face validity, you can simply do a walkthrough of the questionnaire. Up here with construct validity, I left that part out. So we're not talking about a test. In all the pieces where I could measure, I talk about testing. And again, I'm giving examples. Now, if you listen to one of my previous videos, we talked about the importance of using organizational leadership material, especially with your dialogues. For your mock comp, sometimes, especially in this case, it's okay to look at things other than org leadership. And the reason for that is a perfect scale to talk about predictive validity would be the ACT or SAT. Students take that before they go to college. It's designed to predict how well you will succeed or not in college. So this is a scale that everybody's aware of, and it's very useful for this practical application of what predictive validity is. Then I use other scales in here, such as Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, and Belbin. Now, I've worked long enough to know that many companies will use these tests to try and predict the success of a new employee, but unfortunately, the user of the test, usually human resources or the department manager, they just don't know how to read the test and how to interpret the findings. So that doesn't mean that the test itself is bad. It just means that the person using the test needs more instruction on how to interpret those findings. And then we look at concurrent validity. So concurrent validity, I knew just from all of my research that the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire, that's a very reliable, heavily used questionnaire. It was developed by Avolio, Gardner, and Wallumbwa in 2007. Now, when you're using names and dates, make sure they're right. If I wasn't sure of the date, I could simply leave that out and just put the 3 names in there. If I'm not sure of any of it, I could just say the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire. So what happened with this is the scholars developed the scale in 2007. It's used a lot. Well, now they have sold the scale to Mindgarden, and it's a little bit more complicated to gain access to it. So Nieder and Schreisham developed almost the same exact scale. It measures the same constructs. So in their development, they were able to go back to the ALQ and make sure that their test essentially provided the same results. That's concurrent validity, where you can take a new scale, compare it to an old scale, and make sure that you're getting the same results. And then in testing for concurrent validity, we can look at scores from different groups of participants, and that will give you the chance. So if I'm looking at the ALQ, I want to make sure that the people taking the ALI and the ALQ are basically getting the same results. Okay? All right, convergent validity. When we look at this, here we again have the definition. We have an example. Now this is a hypothetical example. I'm just saying that if I was designing a test and I wanted to look at job satisfaction, maybe I'm looking at subscales or constructs of joy, bliss, and happiness. It wouldn't be right if I started looking for sorrow, unhappiness, and depression. Then the scale of job satisfaction, that just wouldn't accurately be measuring the right things. Okay, and then there's a book by Hare et al., and that recommends using the average variance extracted in order to measure for convergent validity. Discriminant validity is essentially the opposite, so I talk about that here. And then again, I just use a conclusion of what I did in answering all of these items on my list. So again, we use the list here. And then I finalize with this. The Cronbach Alpha is a scale that we use, especially with quantitative analysis. We use this heavily with our research to measure for validity. And if a score is above 0.70, it's generally accepted. So I hope you can see that this is a better response. So we're looking at 3 pages here instead of 1, just over 3 pages. But that's a better response for your mock comp because it's providing you with not only the content or the definition of each item in your list, it's also providing a practical application, and in this case, tools of how to measure for it. All right, I look forward to seeing your responses for the mock comp. Have a great day.